Hello, everybody. This is an Ed Puzzle lecture for those of you who were not able to make it into in-class person this week of April 5th through the 9th. So this is week 2 back. And one of the things that you were to do for week 1 was to make a Dada poem. If you don't know what that is, you need to look at week 1's lecture. Ed Puzzle, and it was about making a new poem out of your personal narrative that you submitted to me, where you take some of the words from something you've already created and make something new. So please watch that if you didn't. And you'll need to either submit it digitally through the assignment listing that's under Group A or Group B, depending on what group you're in, or you're going to need to, or you can just wait and bring it to me if you will be in person next week. Okay, so make sure you do that. But let's move on to getting started with Bless Me Ultima. If you did not already get it from the library, and you can get it from the library, I highly recommend having a paper copy. Or if your family can buy one for you, if they're not comfortable getting one from the library, and you have the ability to do that, I highly recommend that. But I will be putting up the PDF version for you underneath the resources, helpful or useful resources section. So look for it there, like where the other PDF books have been put. Okay. So anyway, today what we did in class that you missed was talking about how this book is an edgy book. It does have some controversial stuff in it, but so do a lot of books. And so the warm-up quick write that we did was responding to this prompt, which said, all stories are subversive. How was that? Just having them respond to that. Is that true? Do they agree with that? Do they disagree with that? What does it mean to be subversive? Well, first of all, you got to know what the word subversive is. And if you were to Google that, subversives, it's probably going to give you something to the effect of using the word subvert in it. So then you want to go, well, what's subvert? To subvert is to undermine the power and authority of an established system or institution, usually. So, like overthrow, overturn, bring down, destabilize, topple, supplant, unseat, dethrone. So, in other words, how are books, all stories really, even little kids' stories, how are they all subversive in some way? How do they dismantle the power structures and authority or the way that you see the world? And so after I give people time, and I guess I want you to do that. I want you guys to answer in the chat box, since you can, in the Ed puzzle. How are all stories subversive? Even stuff like The Cat in the Hat or SpongeBob SquarePants. How can any story be subversive? Not just the one we're going to read. Okay, hopefully you've had some time to kind of think about it. Didn't spend too much time. 3 minutes would have been plenty. But some of the things we talked about in class were like, look at the Cat in the Hat story. What's that about? The Cat in the Hat is about a couple of kids who are really bored on a rainy day, and their parent leaves the house. So they're all alone, but there's this fish that's telling them what to do, right? It's kind of like a replacement for the parents, for authority, for power, for the rules of society. And the Cat in the Hat comes knocking on the door, and they just go crazy and party and destroy the house, making a giant mess. And they even invite Thing 1 and Thing 2 to make it even worse. So they're having a party behind the mom's back. But luckily, Cat in the Hat, and the fish the whole time, right, is telling him, oh my goodness, what's your mother going to say? Oh no. And he's all freaking out. Well, then the Cat in the Hat, though, he fixes it in the end, cleans everything up, and it's like nothing ever happened magically. And then the mom comes home just in time. They didn't get caught. And the mom asks them, well, what did you do today, kids? And then the book asks you, well, what would you do if your mother asked you? We all know the answer. You would so lie to your mom. You would not tell her, there's this weird cat, and they brought these two other creatures, and they totally destroyed the house, and we totally had fun, and it was great, and we made a mess, but it's all okay now. They're like, you let a stranger in the house? That's interesting. Why would a kid's story not only acknowledge that they know that you're going to lie, but it's almost like encouraging breaking the rules and being a little naughty when your parents aren't around? That's crazy, right? Well, that one's like really subversive for a kid's story. Um, but that's something like every single little kid's probably had read to them, or they've read at some point, or at least aware of. It's a super famous elementary, like little kid book, like kindergarten. So yeah, if you think about it, just about every story can change the way you see the world and make you kind of poke fun at power structures or kind of question why is society like that or why does our culture do this or why do people tend to act like that. It really makes you question. So anything that makes you question is subversive. And this book is no different. But it is kind of controversial. And it has been banned, but so is just about every single book that we read. Scarlet Letter next year, The Great Gatsby, The Catcher in the Rye. That's a bunch of books you can read next year that's all been banned and then brought back. Every single one of them have had people getting in a kerfuffle over it. Romeo and Juliet, all of Shakespeare is pretty naughty at times. People may not know it because the language is hard to understand, but it's full of just inappropriate jokes. Um, so a lot of the things that you read in high school are kind of edgy. Um, yeah, especially, but I mean, even the stuff like, what about To Kill a Mockingbird in middle school? Whoo, whoo, whoo. Was that edgy? Was that banned? Uh-huh. But did they have value? Of course they did. So we looked at a couple of articles, and I won't read them to you to make it quick, but I will attach them if you'd like to read them. But one of the articles talks about, as a newspaper article, the first one we read, and we talked about it. I talked about one parent complaining about the bookless meal in a school in Nordesta, California, about 15 years ago. And the superintendent read a little bit of the book, not the whole thing. He admitted, I read some of it. And he decided, okay, I'm going to ban it because I think it's anti-Catholic. But he didn't finish the book and was taking things out of context. And the newspaper article writer said, well, you know, it has a lot of good stuff in there, and a lot of they interviewed students, and a bunch of the students said there wasn't anything bad in it. I don't know what they're talking about. It's no big deal. Um, but some of the reasons that it talks about why it was complaining about it is because of, you know, profane language, pagan content, right? So there's those reasons why some parents were against it. But it also talks about how the book was considered a top 10 reading list for all ages by the president's wife in 2008 named Laura Bush. Like, she thought it was a great book for kids, and she was an elementary school teacher. And it was also kind of one of the selections of the National Endowment of the Arts for the Big Read, which is a national book club. So this is a book that's like recommended by, you know, major professionals in what makes good literature, right? A lot of people respect this book. And it was considered the year's novel for the U.S. Academic Decathlon competition the year that it got banned in California. So it's kind of, you know, on the one hand, you know, we don't want to offend people, but on the other hand, like, well, what happens when we start? Are we worried about a slippery slope once we start banning one book? Well, who's to say? Why does one parent get to say, "Ooh, this book shouldn't be read"? So then we looked at, or one anybody, right? Why does one person in a democracy get to overrule what many professionals and experts find value in to teach? So then we looked at another article that was actually a lawyer's letter to the school district saying, I think you should stop banning it. And here's why. It actually is against the First Amendment to do so. He uses the phrases it's constitutionally unsound and might expose the school district to actually getting into lawsuits and get into trouble if they do ban the book. And it also talks about how, you know, parents don't have a right to have their viewpoint reflected in the school curriculum. In fact, quote, from the case of Liebert versus Harrington, it says no parent has the right to tell a public school what his or her child will or will not be taught. And then another court case for Blau versus the Fort Thomas Public School District said, nor do parents have a fundamental right generally to direct how a public school teaches their child. And furthermore, the school has a constitutional obligation not to endorse or accommodate a particular perspective or point of view. So she's just one person's point of view. We can't support only one and not offer optional other points of view. So you can't prescribe what shall be orthodox, quote, you know, in politics, nationalism, religion, or other matters of opinion. So it's kind of our duty as teachers to show you different points of view. And this is a book that a lot of, because it's a Latinx book, part of what's called Chicano literature. Over half of our school has Latinx or Chicano ancestry as part of their identification, and a lot of the things that happen in this book can really relate to them. So, and that tends to be the things that people are upset about, or things that are part of their culture. So, it seems maybe anti-cultural and bigoted if we don't allow it to at least be an option. And the ending of this letter was great. It said, individual freedom, democracy, and a good education all depend on protecting the right to read, inquire, question, and think for ourselves, which is what this book is about. It's about a little boy trying to figure out what he believes and what he wants and what he's going to be when he grows up. And he has to learn to think for himself and not just do what one parent or another parent wants. Because the conflict of the story is his mom wants one thing, his dad wants the other, and that they aren't the same thing. And there's no way to make everybody happy. So he has to figure out what's going to make him happy. Being respectful of parents, of course. It's never about being disrespectful to your parents, but he's very worried about, doing what they want and being, a good little boy. But it is about him learning to think for himself, which is the whole point. And in fact, it's a California state standard to show you guys controversial ideas for you guys to explore and critique and think about and decide for yourself what you think about them. It's not for me to tell you what to think. I'm just presenting a book, and it's up to you guys to go through that process of what you think about it, right? So that was kind of the first chunk of class, was having that kind of philosophical discussion. And then I showed the pacing guide and the directions. So I also attached that. You need to look at that. And it talks about what you need to read each week. And so go ahead and look at that when you get a chance after after you're done watching this little Edpuzzle lecture. But just so you know, let me read the directions to you. It says, for each date below, you're expected to have read the chapters and have 2 open-ended text-supported questions that you will show me at the beginning of each class. So if you're unable to come to class, you're going to have to send me a picture of it and attach it to the reminder, okay? And you get points for doing that, so make sure you do that. And there's an example I'm going to show you in a second about what I want. And then you're also to do a little research for each chunk. I will announce these at the end of each session for the next chunk you're going to read. The first one is, there's a typo on the directions. The first one is going to be that quote I gave you. How are all stories subversive? And so you want to be thinking about, how does this book make you question and think about things? Okay. Either as through the characters or through the concepts and the ideas. Okay. So how is it subversive? But you can you can also in your notes talk about other things on your sticky notes, which I'll show you what that is in a sec. And yes, I would want you to share out what you found out and make sure that you apply that concept to the information in your analysis for that chunk. But if you're not going to be here in person, this might be this will be part of your discussion boards. So because if you can't come to Socratic Seminar, if you miss a date to do your Socratic Seminar, no matter if you're in person all the time or you just miss that one day, you need to do a discussion board to make it up to get those points. Okay. So those will pop up starting next week. But the chapters you need to read for next week's discussion board is going to be chapters 1 through 4, and because it's in Spanish, 1 through 4. Okay? If you don't speak Spanish, you might want to have Google Translate on you, because I would say like maybe 1% of the book is in Spanish, like little phrases here and there. You might want to know what's going on. It's helpful to know what they're saying. It's done for a couple of reasons. One, it's authentic. 2, it gives it kind of that atmosphere of what it would be like to be in a home where they speak Spanish, and it adds beauty to have that kind of mix of language. So it's aesthetic, and it really kind of helps add to what's called verisimilitude, the truthiness of the Latinx experience in bilingual homes or in homes that just speak Spanish. In this case, they only speak Spanish in that house. Only the children speak English after they go to school for a while and learn it. So anyway, chapters 1 through 4. And if you're group 1A or 5A, it's due by Monday, April 12th. If you're group 1B or 5B, it's due Thursday, April 15th. Like, you got to be ready when you come to class. For group 2, it's Tuesday, April 13th. 2A, excuse me. And if you're 2B, it's Friday, April 16th. So it all just depends on your group. So make sure to look at the pacing guide and ask me any questions that you have before we get too far in this. Now, on the back of the pacing guide, I have an example of what it would look like, a big picture. And let me show what it is here. So I took a screenshot of a page of the book, of the PDF version of the book. And this is in chapter 1. And you can see all those italic fonts. All the italics is when the main character Antonio is having dreaming. There's a lot of dreams in this. And he's basically watching his own birth. It's a dream of his birth. And in it, the two families are kind of having a fight about what his destiny will be. The father's family wants him to be like a cowboy, and then a rancher, and the mother's family wants him to be a farmer or even a priest. And they're all fighting. And the woman that helped give birth to the baby by being a midwife, her name is Ultima, the title character of the book, who has the kind of magical powers in the story. She, wants to stop the fighting, and she says, "Cease," she cried, and the men were quiet. "I pulled this baby into the light of life, so I will bury the afterbirth and the cord that once linked him to eternity. Only I will know his destiny." Because they had a belief that there's a symbolic kind of connection in the dream anyway. That they thought if you bury, like the brothers and the family members say this, if the afterbirth is buried in the earth, he'll be a farmer or a priest, as he's connected to the earth. For the farmer anyway. And the father's family wants him to be a cowboy, so they want to burn the afterbirth and let the ashes go into the wind. So he's traveling like a rancher would. I take a drink. Anyway, so anyway, that part like really struck me, talking about destiny and stuff. And the dream's really interesting. It's scary to think about watching your own birth. Kind of weird, like, because there's no way you can remember that. So my sticky note I put on there, I asked a bunch of open-ended questions to kind of be a conversation starter during my Socratic seminar, pretending I'm a kid, right? So I put here ambiguous dreams. So I have this kind of lit device about ambiguity. So as long as you're talking about a theme, I'm happy. As long as you've got some theme here, I'm good. But it doesn't have to be any other device, just the themes at least, right? Or, whatever you're comfortable doing. But I put ambiguous dream because it's kind of unclear. Is it a dream, right? So I asked the questions, do you think this really was just a dream, or was it a symbolic magical vision of his birth? Or is it just a manifestation of his own worries? Because this is something that's like in his family, they're arguing about it all the time. He's the baby, and the older brothers are at war, and they're lost. There's no way they're going to be fulfilling the parents' dreams, and he's the last son. So, he hears a lot of this talk. So it's like, is this just a dream that's manifested from kind of the talk he's hearing as a little kid? But then I put, it seems so detailed, like he really saw it. In fact, later on, he starts asking his mom questions, and it all matches. And you're like, oh my God, did he really see it? Is he magical like Ultima? So anyway, and then I ask, and why would Ultima hide his destiny from the family? So see, I've got this kind of like list of kind of suggestive questions about what the meaning might be to kind of help start a conversation about what's going on here, what's the meaning of this book. That's what I want you to do 2 of, anywhere within the first 4 chapters, though they better not both be in chapter 1. That just makes me think that you didn't read more than 1 chapter, okay? So make sure there's like at least one deeper in, okay? And it should be connected to some text that just speaks to you and makes you go, right? Scratching your chin or scratching your head, all right? So that's part of your homework this week. The other part of the homework is taking that photo that you were supposed to take that was supposed to be representative of your year of COVID to add to our Pain No More Poetry project. And what you were to do in that was to bring it with you. And then what I want you guys to do is just write a page worth of just thoughts, ideas, feelings that are associated with that picture. It doesn't have to be one coherent thing. It could be just free word association, or it could be a story. It could be lots of things. So, for example, I picked this picture. I did not take this picture. I'm going to totally admit it. I stole this from the internet. You have to do your own photo, but because we can't submit other people's photos to the school magazine, we have to make it be original, right? But like, let's say I was a student and this is my assignment, and that was my photo of an empty chair next to a window, and it's really dark, but there's light coming from the window. There's so much I could like write down of my feelings. And this and and why do I want you to do that? Well, because we're going to turn it into a poem later. There's a multi-step process about how to write a poem. So I want to play for you this video first about how to write a poem in 5 steps, and then I'll comment on it afterwards. So let's watch that. And it does give some good advice. And what's fun about it is talking about slam poetry specifically, but any modern poem can follow the same rules. It works. Okay. So let's watch the slam poem about how to write a slam poem, and then I'll show you what your assignment's going to be. So it's going to be step one, and I'll show you an example too. But let's watch this.
Miss Gale's 5 Steps to Slam Poetry. A lesson of transformation. Step 1. Write it all down. Take one memory, explore it like a new land, the visiting poet tells the class. Don't leave anything out. Tyler sits in this high school workshop, dizzy with where to start. Memories wander in and out of his heart like vagrants searching for home. He bends to his desk. He writes,
The snow goes black when the moon turns its eyes away. All paper is yellow, all letters spell eviction note. Mama's lies are footsteps too many to count. Making excuses on black snow. I paid the rent. This is your room forever, baby. I love you. But she wouldn't even look at me.
Step 2. Read out loud. As he writes, his lips try on words, then toss them out like bad tenants. He pushes his desk back, stands.
Aunt Jocelyn's rice pudding was sweet, but that's not what I want to write. Have you ever been so cold your hair becomes an icicle? Your little sister's fear of the dark freezes on her lips like she's kissed the ice tray. How hungry have you been?
Step 3. Cut the fat. Abandon extra words. His pen becomes a machete, slashing ands, thens, becauses. Step 4. Read out loud. Again. The 11th grade boy makes sure Step 3's cuts weren't too deep. Step 5. Add flavor. Juice, power, movement, emotion.
Vanilla flavoring is the secret to my aunt's pudding. I kick out a few raisins, but leave one or two. Life needs some bitter to man up the sweet.
His hands reach out like shelves to hold our disbelief. Is this Tyler speaking? The one who keeps his eyes on the floor like they're carrying something heavy? Voice rattles windows.
I am free now.
Body quivers with the pulse of each word.
The sun's joy melts snow.
Fingers trace the curve of his jaw.
My aunt's face was warm as a water heater when she let us in that night.
Our boy is done. His transformation complete. Step 1, write it all down. Step 2, read out loud. Step 3, cut the fat. Step 4, read out loud. Step 5, add flavor. Tyler's first poem takes residence in his heart. He flings his arms wide like an open door. Welcome home.
Oops. Okay. I'll go next slide with this thing in my way. There we go. So hopefully that made some sense here. So the first step is what we're going to do only. Just kind of writing down ideas. Not even worried about it looking like a poem, sounding like a poem, none of that. It's just kind of word vomit on the page associated with what your picture was. Okay. And then we're going to worry about how to cut the fat, how to make it look like a poem next week. All right. So, excuse me. With that being said, all I want you to do is kind of write it all down. So let me see if I can show you the one that I did in class. See if I can. I'm going to hit escape here. I'm going to have to do something. I didn't have it in the PowerPoint. Let me kind of copy and paste it and put it in so you can see it. It's not going to let me show other tabs right now. All right. So give me a sec here. Okay, so here I have the picture, and this is just what I kind of wrote in class thinking out loud of what I was thinking about. So this picture here, the reason why this idea came to me to kind of even look for a picture that looks like this is what I would have done is, except my chair is green and my table is wood colored and my lamp is not that fancy. I did spend a lot of time in COVID in a chair next to a window in kind of a dark living room. For a lot of reasons, it's in the living room, so it's where everybody kind of hangs out together and watching the news and being really, you know, worried about the numbers and what's going to happen. And it's also where I taught a lot from when it got cold and did a lot of my planning and grading. It was kind of like my life was in that chair. So that's where the symbol came from, and it was right by a window, right? So I just started. The picture just made sense to me, like it literally was my time, but then it's empty, so it kind of could be really dark, right? So I just started writing things that came to my mind, and then all of a sudden something occurred to me like a memory. Because usually poems, they're awesome when they have a lot of like feeling and expression and stuff that's not necessarily a story, but generally you want to have some kind of story in there. So me just writing out loud and just kind of putting stuff down, I was able to come up with like maybe a concept for my poem. So this is what I just wrote, not worrying about it looking like a poem yet. So let me just show you kind of like what I was thinking I'd like you to do for the other part of your homework. So here we go. This is what I wrote. I put empty chair in an empty room, sitting for hours upon hours, watching the news, the counting of deaths, the counting of positive tests, the counting of days, weeks, months, thinking about all the empty chairs out there from the increasing death toll. Who else won't come home? Will I end up not coming home? Am I destined to end my life in this chair? Will my chair be empty soon? Parents call almost every day. I'm talking about my parents, hoping that someday we can see each other in the flesh because we're worried will we ever see each other again, back when it was like at the beginning. But will that day ever come? An email arrives as I refresh for the upteenth time. Mother's email, and my mother never emails. I should have added that in there. My mom, she's not a technological person. She'll call me, not send me emails, and she almost never checks her email. But she sent me an email, and it said, "What do you want on the will if I die?" And this was something she asked me many times before, but I just kind of ignored it and didn't want to answer it. But now I felt like, oh, I need to answer this. So I spend days avoiding a response, thinking both of what I want and how I cannot bear to say. Saying makes this all real. Need to respond, start writing the most painful email response, both wanting and not wanting. Ooh, that's supposed to be guilt typo. The guilt for even making the list is intolerable, but I have to push forward. She really wants to know. She's not romantic or emotional. Strong woman who almost never cries, not like me right now. Item one. So then I started thinking, ooh, I can start talking about all the different things that I want, and then like respond emotionally to that. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. I'm not like at that final kind of like point, of course, but I put like, okay, item one. My favorite landscape painting in the living room my grandma painted. And then to look at it in my own wall would give me double pain because it's both my grandma and my mom being gone, even though I love it. Item two, the bronze bust of my uncle that grandpa made, who also he died very young in a car accident. I never got to know him. So then I put, or should my brother get it? He looks just like him. Item three, the small 18th century portrait Aunt Louise gave me. It was meant for me, so why do I feel bad asking for it? We have a lot of artists in our family, so it's my great great aunt was a painter in the Victorian times. It was a painting she did, and it was bequeathed to me when I was born. It's still on my mom's wall. But I want it. It's mine. It's for me. It's also a memory of my Aunt Louise. Um, whom I'm named after. It's my middle name, and Louise is a big family name. In fact, the person that painted it, her name was Louise. So it's like this Louise kind of family thing. It's my mom's middle name also, family name from Germany and Prussia. But anyway, it says, so, I feel bad about that. And then item 4, the Buddhist wood statue of a Siamese prince. And I said, it greets all my mother's guests. Shall I even see it again to greet me? And just like, listing these things that I'm trying to put on the specific things in the house that I would like when she passes. She asked that of my brother too. So it's this horrible kind of thing. And then I was thinking at the end I could put, the family rocking chair. So I've got this empty chair. That's my mom's chair. Ooh, ouch, right? It's like I have this whole kind of like come together of this, like the chair being kind of the symbol of all these different feelings and experiences, right? So then this is what I want you guys to do. Just kind of thinking out loud, doesn't have to necessarily all go together. A page of just thinking out loud that we're going to turn and edit and cut the fat and add flavor and all that stuff and turn it into a poem. Okay? So if you have any questions about that, leave them in the text box so I can respond to you and address it. Or send me a message in Remind, okay? And I could get back to you. So the 2 things I want you guys to do is read chapters 1 through 4 and come up with 2 good sets of questions on a sticky note that's connected to text that kind of sparked the question for you. And be prepared to either come to class on a Socratic seminar and participate, or do the discussion board. Okay, and then doing this just brainstorming kind of for the write it all down step 1 for your Panda More photo. Okay. Well, I'm sorry that I missed you in class. That's too bad, but hopefully this is keeping you from being too lost and behind. Let me know if you need anything, and I hope to see you next time. Bye, guys.